Hello again, I'm Greg. We've been talking about encountering the other as part of our interaction with the social world, the first of three forms of world that we're going to investigate hermeneutically in this final part of our journey through modern hermeneutics and its basic problems. This mediating force that we use in order to recognize others and also investigate ourselves over the life course, we tend to call this the life world. I'm going to give it that phenomenological sort of title here. And just to note that other students of phenomenology have slightly different interpretations of the presence and the purpose of the life world as well as its contents. But for now, let's continue thinking about this encounter and then where we go from there. Let's widen our discussion now to include how my objection to the other. Remember, we've talked about how the presence of the other objects to our presence. And this right after I identify the other as an object in the realm of objects, just as I am to her. How does my objection to the other and is translated into my presence into the social world, which as well contains regions that themselves trail off into the life world? Okay, so here's the beginning of our interface between these first two concepts of world, social world and life world. These regions are both interior to myself, to ego, and further out from the at hand. Okay, remember that in Alfred Schutz, the at hand, or something that has at-handedness, is something that I know something about, but I'm not an expert in at all. It's at hand, it's available to me to learn, but it's not in hand. I don't have any kind of mastery of it, at least at the moment. At first, there is much about this other, much about her, which takes on the sense of the further from self. Her womanhood, which is not at first a discursive object to me, but which is nevertheless alien. Her biography, which is not mine own. Her longevity on average, and of greatest import, how she is treated by and in the social world, which is as well not how I am so treated. Even so, we are placed in a more intimate contiguity with one another, perhaps paradoxically, the farther inward and outward I travel, okay? Because she is going to have the same or similar relationship with stuff that's farthest from both of us and also interior to us. As we are both human beings, we are both same form of consciousness. Okay? So it's really in the social world where me as a guy and she as a woman are going to be farthest apart, in fact. Okay? Not in the region where our species essence takes over, nor in these regions farthest from us, the hinterlands, which we sort of both don't know much about. Okay? So that's interesting. Just docket that and keep that in mind for a moment. The former, the inward, contains not only the space of eros, but also that of dreams. As both partake of ancient tropes, as we've seen, their language makes she and I the same kind of being, one who participates, even in modernity, within the folds of the collective unconscious. We have already seen how dreams speak the same language as does myth itself. And in spite of this, we need not procure a classical education to understand them. This is so due to our own entertainment fictions borrowing heavily from antiquity, and no matter how distilled or inebriated these tropes become by being so recycled, their archetypes and leitmotifs remain both present and comprehensible. The same may be said of dreams. She and I cannot share our actual dreams, but most anything within them, general atmosphere, imagery, dialogue, landscape, symbol, action, and plot, can indeed be shared. How many times have we acknowledged to another that we too have had a similar dream as they? Dreams, as well as the presence of eros, both fleeting, even if one creates its own reality and the other merely departs for a time, that of the wide-awake social world, are aspects of the interiority of ego, and their presence reminds us that both she and I are not only of the same species, but also of the same consciousness. It is by far a more didactic and formal affair, but Schutz's at hand and hinterland as well confirm this shared humanity. But unlike the interiority of the psyche, this time I bring elements of the life world into the social world, as well as make them part of my own biography within it. Here, I do not dream in mythic sequence, but rather actually study and consciously learn mythology. I may say the same about Eros, this time studying anatomy, physiology, and human sexuality as a set of objects. In a word, the realm of the at-hand, and yet further afield, the hinterland, which contains things, events, and knowledge of which I have barely heard about at all, but yet I still know to exist. This is the hinterland, are liquid regions that can be ported into other zones of the wide-awake consciousness that itself travels through the everyday reality and thus across a number of such topographically laid out regions throughout each of those days. I may be, in fact, a student of a number of such at-hands, hoping to make one or more of them into an in-hand, and thus bring them topologically closer to my Dasein. That said, today, mythology is generally not one of these, nor is human sexuality, and the Jungian analyst might suggest that the more deeply held the experience of an aspect of life world, the less we are inclined to make it into an object. Okay, that's an interesting point. Perhaps this is so for fear that it would not so much demythologize it, in general, always a good thing, both ethically and discursively, but rather that we ourselves would no longer be able to fully embody it as a subject alone. It would be a distraction, certainly, to be thinking of sex in clinical terms whilst one is attempting to enjoy it, or dissecting a dream, or yet subjecting it to a literary critique as we are yet dreaming. Thus, there is a difference between demythology and simple description. Not only is this evident with regard to the critical capacity of the one versus the other, but, as well, that the latter is necessary to preserving the ability of the social world to absorb the life world with neither demur or descant. That we decant myth in entertainment is as well a function of the amount of time we have to be entertained, given all of our other obligations, both for adults and youth alike. The evening fire, encircled by the primordial villagers listening to the oral narrative, which blends the rare personal experience with the extra-mundane of cosmology, has long been overtaken by spending a few hours after dinner watching, or perhaps interacting with, visual media of various kinds. Nevertheless, the rounds of the day continue to dominate human affairs. We are not, and never have we been, nocturnal beings. Indeed, this earliest distinction between the light and the dark must have been placed not only deeply into our consciousness, but also as well into what then passed for conscience. For darkness was the time of heightened danger, and only with the advent of domesticated fire did this peril abate. Fire is thus, once again, in both myth and dream the perfect symbol of enlightenment, and even of life itself. For before our Promethean days, we were but a species of parochial comrades, hunting in packs with the most primitive, if artfully designed and executed, weapons of flint and obsidian, chalcedony and quartz, and then sheltering, nay, cowering, in huddled bunches overnight. Day and night, for what counted as a species eternity, this was the proto-human lot. We're talking millions of years here. That early scene in Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey is really very moving and poignant in that regard, where, the primordial humans, the proto-humans are kind of cowering and holding and huddling with one another, and you hear the sort of roar or the shriek or the snarl of the leopard in the background. And of course we have fossilized skulls from this time period with two huge holes in the back of their skull where a leopard or one of the leopard's forebears has kind of chomped down on the skull of our distant ancestors. So there's direct evidence for this sensibility that, without domesticated fire, it's kind of like a total crapshoot if you're going to survive the next night. So imagine then a species that lived in this way for millions of years, right, before there was a sense that we could defend ourselves systematically, and was something that nature herself kind of abhorred, right, that animals of all kinds will flee the flames. Humanity itself, our own subspecies, would not have developed if it were not for our forebears harnessing the power and safety of the flame. This is why Gaston Bachelard can write confidently about psychoanalyzing an element, for by 1938, fire was already well on its way to taking hold of the social world through the burgeoning of fascist politics and a corresponding narrowing of the aesthetic sense to suit them. Okay? This is the Psychoanalysis of Fire, which appeared in 1938. There is much to note in the manner that we port mythological motifs into daily life. It is yet one of the surest signs of the presence of the life world in that of the social, and the inveigling of other realities into that of the paramount wide-awake mundanity, which takes up the vast majority of our waking selfhood. In our most casual and cliché utterances and thoughts, this interaction is fully present. Our passions and tempers can be fiery, our desires flickering, our view of the other as if she were our self-immolation, our adoration of her warm, our love heated, and so on. Yet we have not abandoned the earliest of our daily hunting metaphors just because we circle the flames each night. She is also my prey, my conquest, but she in turn makes me into her servant, her chattel. I stalk her, but she collects me. The hunting and gathering tropes are clear enough, even if we now know better that these activities were not at first separated by a gender division of labor at all. The first division of labor is not gender, in fact, but rather age. It's just a simple case that an adult body can do things that a child's body cannot. Just so, we have come full circle with our own subsistence in today's social organization, for we have regained the absence of genderedness in all realms. What men can do, so can women do. As if Engels were prescient in perhaps an unexpected manner, we have returned to the primordial division of labor, where only age matters regarding task at hand. So that's an interesting thing, too, as Frederick Engels would have been, in some ways, pleased to see that. The fellow who invented these words that we use still today, primitive communism, oriental despotism, all of those kinds of things. They sound very kind of Victorian, and that makes sense given his authorship, but Engels identified the first division of labor, and the first division of labor is now also the last one. This is a fine example of how the life world, with its seemingly airy area of myth and dream, influences quite bodily and almost causally the social world. If it did not do so, the more brute factum of divergent experiences, say, between the dominant genders, would render both she and I incapable of understanding one another. Only the most staunch feminist would not admit to this, and this itself may be interpreted as a lack of participation of such a person in the life world, the space wherein our more authentic humanity emerges and is thence expressed. Even if social location, a recently much vaunted, but in fact just now a 3-century-old idea, it actually appears first in 1725, so 300 years ago last year, displaces the life world, it acts as both the result and the source of a refraction process. It produces a hall of mirrors, wherein the authenticity of Dasein as well as our species essence is diffracted or even distorted. But even if social location, to repeat that, is present, it still must enact it. The woman may bring the nurturer's archetype into the sphere of commerce or politics, and the man the warrior's. All of this contains great grounds for specific lines of interpretation, certainly, but just here we must hold back a moment to dwell rather upon the structure of how life world and social world interact and even commingle. The interiority of the life world tells me that I am a human being first, and that there are no important differences between she and I. The uttermost regions of the social world trend away in the same direction. Both of us may learn the discourses, for instance, and both of us may take up any labor role. I am human first, a person second, and then only a man or a woman after these. Social roles follow thereafter, mostly based upon age, network, and experience. It is instructive to remind ourselves at this juncture that in simply becoming an adult in traditional society, one also, more profoundly, became a human being. This is our first clue that for our most ancient of human ancestors, and perhaps before even they, there was little enough to distinguish the social world from the life world. The presence of the archetypical rites of passage, birth, puberty, marriage, and death, demarcated not merely one's place in the social contract, but were more truly ontological thresholds, stepping over which made one into a new form of being. Birth represents an intrusion of the other world into the this world, just as does death. In order for the social world to transform what is at first an entity alien to it, it requires the services of the life world to explain this entity's presence. Hence, the entire purpose of there being a cosmology at all is to provide human consciousness with a reason for its very existence. Okay? So we're thinking up our own sense that, okay, well, why does thought exist? We have to sort of think that through. We have to use thought to explain the presence of thought. Okay, we have to think through the idea that we can think at all. This is why all early explanations of the presence of the universe are more aptly cosmogonies, narratives of origin. In mechanical solidarity, I do not need to know precisely why I myself am here, but I do need to understand why life exists at all. In this declension, the non-existent I becomes merely an I, surround it with scare quotes, a member of a group. Today, of course, we have inverted these relations, seeking instead a personal purpose and biographically inclined meaningfulness for a single human life, that is my own. In a sense, we are making what was once only a singularity into what is singular, a notable presence, rather than a mere instance of a principle. In so doing, I no longer directly employ the trophotropaic alchemy of myth and dream. Yes, I acknowledge how these make me human, make me what I am, but they no longer can by themselves conjure a who for me, or for anyone else, herself included. I am biographically no longer wedded to the rites of passage as ontological categories, but rather pass through greatly distended versions thereof, and may even double back upon some of them. This ability to do so with marriage, for instance, and with some ease, and even sometimes cheat death itself through modern medical maneuvers, might suggest that I too can regain my youth, which in fact does not follow from the other two instances. Goethe's strident and desperate verse to this regard could then simply be seen as a personalist remark upon Mary Shelley's mythological narrative. Creating the temporary illusion of immortality, or at the least indefinite life. In the terms of the social contract, this may be taken a little more literally, perhaps pace our hermeneutic theme. If I have married thrice, does that not imply that I have been 3 different persons, living 3 distinct lives? If I've had 7 brushes with death, does that not mean I have lost to me the same number of living incarnations? This is how either a dream or a myth would take biographical happenstance, but today, and for our waking consciousness, these events retain the stuff of singularity. We would rather say such things have made me what I am, a singularity into that which becomes singular. In so doing, once again, I gather together such leaves disparate, grassy or no, and bind them into a monograph momentous, rather than port them unto a cosmogony portentous. Thank you for listening.